1 year and 5 months ago to the day at 8:15 p.m., I was being driven with great haste by a friend to the Cobequid Health Center in Lower Sackville because we thought I was having a heart attack. The emergency room was busy that night, not overwhelmed, thank goodness. The staff at that moment in the pandemic were being appropriately cautious about the infectious nature of the virus. My friend was calm and smiling, and I was absolutely losing my mind because I thought I was going to die. 2.5 years earlier, a close relative of mine had been rushed to emergency in another city because his aorta had ruptured, and he had a very short time to live if emergency surgery was not immediately available to him. And with enough genetic similarity to my relative, I was sure that I was in the same situation with a very short time to live. And if you or someone you know has been in a similar moment, you know already that words are far from adequate to explain or express that feeling, standing on the razor's edge between life and death. As you might have guessed by now, I did not die that night in the Cobequid Health Center, and so far I have not died since. And I'm happy to tell you that my relative is still with us on this side of the sod. All of this is due to the extraordinary skill of medical professionals, amazing medical research, the grace of God, and your tax dollars. I'm alive because of your tax dollars. I hope that doesn't cause too much instant regret. When Universal Medicare was introduced to this country, the charge was led by Tommy Douglas, a Baptist preacher who became a politician. He was Premier of Saskatchewan, later a member of Parliament, later still the first leader of the New Democratic Party. He stared into the jaws of the lion. He fought off dissent and ridicule. He championed the cause of universal Medicare throughout the doctors' strike. He traded barbs with the opposition. And he finally joined forces with that redoubtable progressive conservative, John Diefenbaker, and liberal Lester Pearson to make a national system of Medicare a reality. These three politicians and their respective caucuses fought tooth and nail to make sure that your tax dollars would keep me alive. 60 years later, I'm alive because of Tommy Douglas and your tax dollars. Well, I'm not supposed to be talking about universal Medicare, but I do want to make a point about it that is vitally and urgently significant to our theme here today. Universal Medicare came about because people fought for it. It came about because of the ordinary citizens of this country who persuaded their elected officials that they wanted their tax dollars to go to work for the common good. They wanted their tax dollars to go for the common good. No one had ever even thought of me in the early 1960s. No one foresaw me being rushed into the Cobequid Health Center in Lower Sackville. No one imagined the medical testing and procedures that I would require, but together, the ordinary citizens of this country decided through a groundswell of popular support that their tax dollars were well spent if they wanted to keep each other in good health. I think we're on the precipice of another such a moment. The Basic Income Conference and the basic income groups and friends and all of us who have come together are part of a nationwide movement that is saying we want our neighbors, not only ourselves, to have dignity, to have decent shelter, to have enough food for their kids and for themselves. And we are willing to spend our tax dollars to make that happen. We are willing to share. It is a priority for us because that's the kind of society we want. My topic is fair taxation. And I think the vast majority of people in this country would willingly agree, if asked, without much persuasion, that taxes should be fair. And indeed, the taxation regimes in this country aspire towards fairness. But we have also been seduced by the siren songs of slogans of political parties who promise things like tax cuts. Who doesn't want a tax cut? Yay, tax cuts. We have started to believe in this society, in this era of late capitalism and the ascendancy of neoliberalism, that tax cuts are an expression of some kind of social righteousness. We have been told over and over that we should want tax cuts. Tommy Douglas of Medicare fame wanted people to have a fair deal too, starting with access to medical care. That for him was a form of fair taxation or social righteousness that he would like to see. But a great many people in this country and in the modern West in general think that taxation is a great evil. One of my Twitter conversation partners last month rather pointedly and pithily replied to my remarks with 3 words. He said, "Taxation is theft." So I want to propose to you today that tax fairness and tax cuts and taxation is theft are all phrases that love to be bandied about as synonyms, but they are in fact deeply contradictory. Tax cuts are not an expression of fair taxation. Tax cuts are not an expression of fair taxation if it means my neighbor cannot feed her child supper, and that child goes to school hungry in the morning because they are literally too impoverished to have a place to live and have enough to eat. That is not fair taxation. Trumpeting the slogan, as my Twitter interlocutor said, trumpeting the slogan that taxation is theft is not an expression of tax fairness. Proposing that taxation is theft is a form of intentional ignorance. If we step back enough to consider rationally the massive public good that arises from combining our resources. Taxation provides for roads and schools and fire services and public health and disaster relief and sanitation, and for the emergency room and the personnel at the Cobequid Medical Center. Call me a fool on April Fool's Day if you like, but I like taxation. I like paying my taxes. Do I want more money in my pocket? Sure I do, because I'm a little selfish and a little greedy. Of course I want more for myself. Maybe that's human nature, but we don't have to be trapped by our selfishness. We don't have to be trapped by our greed and short-sightedness. We can rise above that as a society and say, there is another way. There is another option. Tommy Douglas and his crew knew it 60 years ago when they fought for universal medical care, and we know it today as we fight for basic income. Basic income, as we have heard already today, reduces some of the other costs to the public purse. Contact with the justice system, homelessness, violence, addictions, recidivism, domestic abuse, petty crime, and serious crime. Basic income reduces the costs of our overburdened systems of welfare and police services and healthcare. Basic income reduces the costs of all the structures and buildings and vehicles and offices and personnel required to keep those systems in place. In short, poverty is more expensive than reducing poverty. Poverty is more expensive than reducing poverty. More government services is more expensive than fewer government services. Anyone who argues otherwise is either lacking in creativity or too lazy to do the math. There is another way. It is the way of dignity. It is the way of decency and common sense and the moral high ground and respect and mutual trust. It is the way of putting into action, real action, our half-hearted utterances about wanting fair taxation and a just society. I am alive because of your tax dollars. And I'll tell you more than that, I am grateful for your tax dollars. And even more than that, I want my tax dollars to help keep someone else alive, to help them really live, to have enough to be able to feed their child supper and send them to school properly fed and with proper snow pants and with running shoes and enough money for a comic book and some chewing gum and a childhood. I want my tax dollars hard at work, lifting people out of poverty, not keeping them down in some kind of spinning whirlpool of a welfare system that dehumanizes and cannot hope to alleviate suffering in a lasting way. I happen to be someone who follows Jesus, and not just on Twitter. And the most important thing that Jesus said is that he came into this world so that all would have abundant life. Abundant life, not scraping by, not just barely making it, abundant life. And I want abundant life for everyone in this city and in this province and in this country. You can keep my tax cuts. Thank you very much.
Amen.